The ancient religion, Zoroastrianism, was the ancient religion of the Persians, the Persian Empire. You had the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, and the Persian Empire. And the Persian Empire had the religion known as Zoroastrianism. It was founded by Zoroaster, or Zoroaster. Today, this religion, or a version of it, is still practiced by people known as the Parsees. Parsi means Persian. The Parsees live mainly on the east coast of India. They number, according to different estimates, anywhere from 70,000 to 100,000, maybe more. But they're not that numerous. They're relatively economically well off, well educated, but they have not exactly managed to increase and multiply over the centuries. They reverence fire, but they do not worship it. This is a misconception, or at least in modern day Parsees do not worship fire. They consider it a symbol of divinity. It is associated with purity. Also exposed to the dead. And dead people be decomposed by the elements, by the birds, by whatever. They arrived in India in the 700s to 900 CE. Before then, they were in Persia. Finally, they were driven out by the Muslims. Today, Persia is in a bad state. Persia is at war with the USA and with Israel. It's being bombed, and even if it comes through, the present turmoil will be in a bad situation. And it has been led into its present conundrum by the violence, by the fanaticism of its religious leaders. Many Persians may be looking to find a new religion. It's been suggested that some form of religion or Zoroastrianism might be suited to them. It's not as far-fetched as it seems, but it is something that is unlikely. Nevertheless, Zoroastrianism tells us something about the psychology of the ancient Persians, present-day Persians. It's worth noting also it's connected with Judaism, with the religion of Judaism, with our appreciation of the Bible, of biblical studies. So we'll speak of it a little. Texts of the Zoroastrianism are known as the Gathas. The Gathas are only a portion of the religious texts, of the religious books that the Parsees have. They are considered the oldest ones. And some of them are considered to be the original utterances of whoever founded the Zoroastrian religion. And they are monotheistic. They're different from the present day or the later developments of the Zoroastrianism. They're more monotheism. They're more similar to the Bible in many ways. It's been suggested they were founded by a biblical figure. According to their traditions, this figure was Jeremiah, or a disciple of Jeremiah. But other suggestions have been made, including Esther and Mordecai, that there was some type of Israelite input to that religion, to that area. And this is not an original suggestion of our own. Others made the same, came up with the same idea long before us. Recently, a group of rabbinical students belonging to an organization belonging to an organization that calls itself the Sanhedrin. They issued a letter signed by the rabbis of the Mount Zion Sanhedrin court, which presented as a call to the Iranian people to abandon the regime of the Islamic Republic, that is present-day Iran, which they described as heirs of evil, similar to the Satan, the god of evil. According to later developments of Zoroastrianism, there are two gods, a good god and a bad god. Originally, they only had one good god, but changes were made and other elements were introduced. So that is how it is known in classical writings. Sanhedrin argues that the religious reforms of Zoroastrianism to bring it closer to the biblical concepts took place during the same period as the Purim story. We disagree with this, but what happened during the time of Purim might have influenced it, may have had some influence. Get back to this. The Israelites were divided into two different sections. In the south was the kingdom of Judah. In the north, the kingdom of Israel. The kingdom of Israel consisted of 10 tribes. The south consisted of 3 tribes of Benjamin, Judah, and Levi, and also representative portions of the other tribes. The Syrians had conquered the northern kingdom. The Syrians had come along and conquered all of the northern kingdom, that is, the separate tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel, and they'd taken them all overseas in ships or overland to areas of the Assyrian Empire. For instance, in 2 Kings 17, it says, verse 6, in the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria. He carried the Israelites away to Assyria. He placed them in Halach on the Habor, on the river of Gozan, and the cities of the Medes. The cities of the Medes are mentioned as a place of exile. The cities of the Medes were in the western area of what is now Persia, Iran. They joined an area named Manai, which is also part of Iran, and that is where the Israelites were taken to. The Aramaic translation to Amos 4:3 says that the Israelites were taken to beyond the mountains of Manai. In ancient times, this was the areas of Assyria and Aratu or Ararat. There's a lot of exiles from both areas. And in these areas, the Israelites federated with other peoples known generically as the sons of Gomer. They include the Cimmerians, the Gamiri, and the Scythians. It's also represented symbolically in the book of Hosea, where Hosea is told to take a loose woman called Gomer, that is the same name given to the Cimmerians in the Bible, Gomer. And from this woman he has 3 children, and these 3 children are taken to represent the 3 separate sections of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. What happens to these children shows us what happened to the tribes of Israel in their places of exile. The Cimmerians were first recorded at war with the Urartu, Ararat, north of Assyria, in the region of Menai, western Media, north of Assyria. Some of them were already auxiliaries in the Assyrian forces, and they had a Syrian regiment in the Assyrian army. They specialized in equestrian matters with horses, chariots, and cavalry. And the Scythians were another group that emerged from them. They were part of the Cimmerians in the beginning. And the 2 groups interlap and interchange. And there were groups of Cimmerians and Scythians on both sides of the warring groups. They rebelled against the Assyrians. The capital of Assyrian Nineveh was captured by the Babylonians and Medes and Scythians in about 614 BCE, according to conventional dating. The Scythians were betrayed and pushed out by the Medes. And shortly afterwards, in 580 BCE, the Babylonians conquered Judah. Meanwhile, the Medes betrayed the Scythians and they massacred their leadership. And the Scythians and the Cimmerians were driven in stages to the north of the Caucasian region. This, which in classical terms is known as Scythia, trace angles on Saxons and related nations to that region. And from there they moved to Scandinavia and they moved to Western Europe and they moved to the British Isles. Meanwhile, the Medes, who had betrayed them and defeated them and driven them away, the Medes were replaced by their allies, the Persians. Persians had always been part of the Mid together with the Medes, but they had been subservient to them. Eventually the Persians took over. And Cyrus the Great of the Achaemenid dynasty, he conquered Babylonia in 550 BCE. He was a Persian. And Herodotus tells us that the Persian contains a number of tribes, Pasargadae and Marathai and Maspai, the main tribes, and then of these, Pasargadae the most distinguished. They contain the clan of Achaemenides, from which spring the Persian kings. And he continues, other tribes of the Parthianae, the Rusii, Germani, and so on. The Pasargadae have a name meaning sons of Gad, into the governor, and this indicates the presence of Israelites amongst them. The Israelites from the 10 tribes of Israel. We should remember the Israelites from the 10 tribes of Israel, before they were taken into exile, they were already pagans, so already virtually ceased to be Israelites in the religious sense and also in other ways. But physically they remain descendants of Israel. So we see here the indications that amongst the Persians were Israelites, or some Israelites. So we see here the indications that amongst the Persians were Israelites, or some Israelites. Cyrus was one of them. Cyrus revolted against the Median Empire in 553 BCE. And in 550 BCE, he conquered the Medes. He captured Astyages, and he captured the Median capital city of Ecbatana. Ecbatana was known as one of the cities, one of the areas to which members of the Lost Ten Tribes have been exiled. So here we see an overlapping between the Persians and the 10 tribes from several different directions. Cyrus is credited with freeing the Jews from the Babylonian captivity. The Jews have been taken into exile by the Babylonians, and Cyrus allowed them to return to Judah to rebuild the temple. Cyrus was followed by Cambyses and he by Darius. But there are different versions, different genealogies. It's very confusing. No one really knows who was first and who was who, and who was where. We just have you get a general direction, a general approximation that such and such a person was in charge at such and such a time. This brings us to the story of Purim. The story of Purim is found in the book of Esther. The book of Esther tells us that during the reign of King Ahasuerus was the king of Persia. Now, at some stage, Persia had conquered Babylon and took over the empire, which was, in effect, all of the civilized world at that time. So one of the kings, or perhaps the earliest one, very early king, King Ahasuerus, and the Queen Vashti, and he asked Vashti to appear before an assembly of his, and Vashti refused, so she was removed, and then he had a kind of beauty pageant to find a new queen, and Esther was chosen. Esther was a young Jewish woman living in Persia. She was chosen as a new queen, and she did not reveal her Jewish identity to the king. What she told him we don't know, but she did not reveal to the king that she was Jewish. Also, Mordecai, who was an official of the king, was the uncle of Esther, She did not reveal her relationship to Mordecai until later. But Mordecai and Esther were members of the tribe of Benjamin. Joseph and Benjamin were the only sons of Rachel, the favorite wife of Jacob, who had been renamed Israel. Israel had 12 children from 4 wives. His favorite wife was Rachel. From Rachel he had 2 children, Joseph and Benjamin. Benjamin was to remain with the tribe of Judah as part of the Jewish people, whereas Joseph became a part of the 10 tribes, and through his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, the dominant element in the 10 tribes. In a sense, Mordecai and Esther, through their being descendants from Rachel, the wife of Jacob, they parallel the forces of Joseph, work to rescue and to assist the Jewish people from within. And Mordecai, the uncle of Esther, Mordecai discovered a plot to assassinate the king. The plot was discovered. Meanwhile, another government official named Haman, he became the most powerful entity in the government of the Persian Empire, and he ordered that all officials should bow down to him. Mordecai, however, refused. So Haman plotted to take revenge on Mordecai by wiping out all the Jews in the empire. Haman was a descendant of Agag. Agag was the king of Amalek, the Edomite, and a major adversary of Israel. In Jewish tradition, Amalekites do not need a reason to hate the Jews. They simply hate them and wish to exterminate them. Haman used some type of dice, some type of game, some type of apparatus known as a pool to determine what was the most proficient month in which to carry out his design, his wicked design to kill the Jews, and it fell on the month of Adar. Haman then persuaded the kings to have the Jews exterminated. He described them as a dispersed people of no value to the realm, and he bribed the monarch with a large sum of money. Mordecai urged Esther to use her position as queen to intervene and save the people. Meanwhile, that night, Ahasuerus, the king, could not sleep, and he ordered the court records to be read to him. He was reminded that Mordecai had interceded previously in the plot against the life of the king, and Mordecai had never received any recognition, any reward for this. And then, just then, the arrival of Haman at the court was announced. So Ahasuerus asked Haman what should be done for the man that the king wishes to honor. Assuming that the king is referring to himself, Haman suggested the man should be dressed in the king's royal robes and crown and led around on the king's royal horse while the herald calls. See how the king honors a man he wishes to reward. So the king, to the surprise and horror of Haman, he instructed Haman to do so to Mordecai. The king understood from what Haman had suggested that Haman wished to replace him on the throne. After that, Esther revealed her Jewish identity to the king, and she begs for mercy for her people. She exposed the plot of Haman to wipe out all the Jewish people. She convinces the king to spare the Jews. Haman realizes that he's in a bad situation, and he begins to implore Esther to have mercy on him. And somehow he falls on Esther just as the king enters. And the king interprets the falling of Haman on the queen as an attempt to rape her. So Haman was condemned to be killed. The king explained to Esther that the decree could not be revoked. The Jews would be allowed to defend themselves. The day the Jews were supposed to be massacred, the 14th of Adar, the month of Adar, which later became known as Purim, after the conjuring instruments, the bow that Haman had employed. So the Jews were unable to defend themselves. More than 75,000 enemies of the Jews were put to death. Haman and 10 of his sons were also executed. And that is how we received the feast of Purim. Now, this Pseudo-Sanhedrin proposal is that Haman was a representative of the forces of evil. He should be identified with the tribe of the Magi. The tribe of the Magi were a Median tribe, but they specialized in magic. That's where you get the word magic and magician from, the Magi. And they were an important element within the Persian Empire. And within Persian religion, there were two forces. There was the god of good and the god of evil. But this appears to be a later development or an accretion. Originally, there was only one god. Or according to the purest form of this religion, there was only meant to be one god, but they had added on two of them. And somehow or other, Magi priests took over this religion and added all kinds of pagan and new ideas to it. But originally, we can go to the Gathas, which are the earliest portion of the holy books of the Persians, to see what the intention was. He said that it was actually intended to be monotheistic, and it had quotations, what appear to be quotations from the Hebrew Bible, and many indications of Hebrew origin. This Pseudo-Sanhedrin group, they point to the linguistic similarity between Ahriman, the evil god, and Haman, the wicked, of the Megillah of Esther. Between them and Kamani, and whatever his name is, the Persian leader, who the Jews eliminated. Kamani has a name that reminds them of Ahriman. And they also point out the revolutionary guards that have taken over Iran. They cling to evil and chaos, to the destruction of the world, and bring the world into perpetual conflict and continual rule. They serve Satan and not God. They advance evil and destruction and death, not good and life, and the building of the world that serves God. They implied that originally Zoroastrianism was closer to Judaism and more monotheistic than it became. Originally, Zoroastrianism was quite biblical. They attributed its original teachings to Mordecai. So there may be something to these ideas, and they're worth keeping in mind. Nevertheless, Zoroastrianism did not begin with Mordecai, but rather with Jeremiah, or an emissary of his. Whatever influence Esther and Mordecai had came later.